All right, ma'am. So you already know what's going on, right? So I got to put the handcuffs behind your back.
We'll make this as easy as we can for you, okay?
This is newly released body cam footage of a college student accused of killing her newborn child shortly after giving birth and burying her body in the backyard. After that happened, she allegedly went on to perform in a theater production.
And Miss Demegillo, is that the correct pronunciation?
Demegillo.
Ann Mae Demegillo is now back in custody after she was able to post bond the first time she was arrested, but now she's charged with murder. And this story just took a twist we were not expecting. Authorities say she had the picture of a very shocking person on her phone. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Well, today, Ann Mae Demegillo spoke calmly when a judge spoke to her as she appeared in court for the first time as someone who is now facing a murder charge. Before we get into what happened in court and also how Casey Anthony is being brought into this story, I want to start with some new body cam video we just received in this case.
All right, ma'am. So you already know what's going on, right? So I got to put the handcuffs behind your back.
We'll make this as easy as we can for you, okay? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
So obviously your wrists are super small, so obviously just don't try to slip them or anything like that, okay?
Yeah, we're good. Just cooperate. We'll get the handcuffs off. We just have to go around. Okay.
All right. We're gonna
just
head
gonna
out.
walk around, and we're just gonna bring her around the other way. Okay.
So this is Demegillo with who appears to be her mom by her side, turning herself in at the Flagler County Sheriff's Office. You can see that she kind of shrugs, has a little bit of a smile on her face, it seems, as law enforcement put her in handcuffs. Now, police have said that they have found her to be, in their words, oddly calm throughout this case. Demegillo is now facing a charge of first-degree murder. They believe what she allegedly did was premeditated. On top of that, she is also charged with aggravated child abuse and failure to report the death of a person.
And then the hospital is going to have bigger pads for you as well, so we don't have to worry about these little ones, okay?
Yeah, we'll switch them out. I'll get you some.
Yeah.
Initially, Demegillo was charged with aggravated manslaughter, but a grand jury took a look at this case and brought it to a new level.
Is there anything you have to say?
Is there anything you want to say?
This is video per WFTV of Demegillo trying to outrun the media after she posted bond last month when she was just facing that aggravated manslaughter charge. WFTV also tried to ask her questions as she was brought into the jail back in March. And you can see here, Demegillo didn't say anything.
Ann, why did you let your baby drown? And if you were so afraid to tell your parents that you were having a baby, that you had to let your baby drown, why are you not afraid to go home now?
Okay.
Do you have anything to say about letting your baby drown? Are you afraid to go home now? Are you sorry for what you did?
So here's why it appears prosecutors are going for this more serious charge of murder against this college student who is now an accused killer. Ann Mae Demegillo is 20 years old. She goes to college in the area of Palm Coast, Florida, specifically at a school in Daytona, Florida. Not only is she a student with a very interesting major we'll talk about here in just a moment, but she's also an actress who performs in several local productions, and that is very key when it comes to what police are alleging happened. So let's get into it. March 5th in Palm Coast, Florida, investigators say 20-year-old Ann Mae Demegillo gives birth to a baby girl in the middle of the night as she sat on a toilet in her home.
When deputies arrived on scene, they met with Demegillo. She was a little hesitant to speak at first, and then she advised them that she had been pregnant and delivered the baby and led them to a shallow grave in the backyard. During the investigation and detectives conducting interviews, Demegillo told them that she had delivered a baby in the toilet The child had been crying initially. She then had walked away and returned, and the child had stopped crying and moving. At that point, she hid the infant in a duffel bag in her closet and went about her normal daily routine.
So we just got the document today, a new one that was filed by prosecutors. I'll warn you, the details of this, they are graphic, they're difficult to talk about, but they are very important to talk about when laying out the case that prosecutors have. So they are alleging that Demegillo told investigators, so with her own words, that she watched the child moving inside the toilet with the baby's head partially submerged under the water after giving birth. So Demegillo then allegedly said that she heard the child cry in the toilet. And that is very important when talking about this case and the charges that she is facing. Police then say, once Demegillo believed that the baby was dead, she took the child out of the toilet and put that baby in a duffel bag. The local sheriff was more specific when talking about what Demegillo allegedly told them.
What I can confirm for you is that she stayed in the bathroom cleaning up the blood using paper towels and wash towels from the birth of the baby until the baby died. And she did tell us that she was hoping that the baby would hurry up and die. It's a very tragic case. It's a tragic case for the family, frankly for the mother. Very tragic and emotional investigation by our team. And more importantly, you know, here's a small, not even, you know, a few minutes old really, baby that likely could have lived, that frankly drowned to death. And so the ME has confirmed that the cause of death, preliminarily, still we don't have the final report from the ME, was that the baby died from drowning. The baby also had an abrasion on her head, which we believe is from the birth and the baby falling into the toilet as a result of the birth and hitting her head. And so no changes in the charges. We are still investigating this case.
And the next part of this story is really hard to believe because police say after all of this takes place in her bathroom in the early hours of the morning on March 5th, she puts this baby in the duffel bag, but Demegillo didn't call police. She didn't reportedly call family members. She didn't call anyone. Instead, police say that Demegillo allegedly went on to perform hours later in a musical at a theater in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, where she was playing the character Virtue in the musical Anything Goes. She's not a main character. Virtue's kind of this showgirl that comes in for the big musical numbers. So you think about the physical activity that she is doing after all of this played out. And of course, in her mind, what must have been playing out after what she allegedly went through in the early hours of the morning in her home. She's doing all of this on stage. And we found Demegillo to be very active in local theater there in Florida. We found another theater introducing her for a show. It says that she is pursuing a degree in forensic science, which we thought was interesting. On top of that, we found her first show in the area to be The Little Shop of Horrors. Now, Demegillo allegedly went to school that day as well. She just allegedly went on with her life as if nothing had happened. And again, she never called police and she never called emergency responders. According to police, after she put the baby's body in a duffel bag and she hid that bag in a closet, she goes off to school, she goes off to perform, and then she returns home around 10 o'clock that night. After that, she allegedly put the child's body in a shallow grave in her backyard.
She went to her college, did a performance at a theater, and then returned back to the home. At that point, she determined that she needed to bury the child. This was at approximately 10 p.m. last night. At that point, she then buried the child in a shallow grave in the back. She is currently detained and will be charged with aggravated manslaughter of a child. The investigation is still ongoing with the medical examiner, interviews.
Now, police learned of what allegedly happened, not because Demegillo called them, but because she allegedly sent social media messages to someone about what happened, And that person called the sheriff's office to go to her home. Demegillo allegedly buried that child's body in her backyard in a shallow grave. This is a view of the home on Google. You can see the backyard there. And deputies say the only person who was home at the time all of this took place, along with Ann Mae Demegillo, is her mom. So now I want to talk about Demegillo's phone and the shocking discovery that investigators made when they did an analysis of it. The Flagler County Sheriff is alleging that the 20-year-old had pictures of Casey Anthony on her phone, along with pictures of newborn babies on her device. Now, you'll remember Casey Anthony, of course, a very infamous name in the true crime world. She was accused of killing her 2-year-old daughter in 2008, also in Central Florida. She was found not guilty in that case. Court documents have said that Demegillo told investigators that she had no idea she was pregnant. Deputies allege that Demegillo, though, had searched on her phone for, quote, newborn premature babies, Palm Coast OBGYN, and foods to decrease fertility. It is unclear specifically when those searches were made.
And then the hospital is going to have bigger pads for you as well, so we don't have to worry about these little ones, okay?
Yeah, 我出去买，我给出下。
Now, this is the body cam video of when Demegillo was first arrested on the manslaughter charge back on March 6th. She bonded out of jail shortly after that. But here we are roughly 1 month later, and Flagler County deputies announced her arrest on the murder charge.
And Miss Demegillo, is that the correct pronunciation?
Demegillo.
Demegillo. Hold on. And it usually takes me about 3 times to get it right. So about the 3rd time I see you, I should be getting it.
Demegillo faced a judge this morning in Flagler County on the new charges. This was just a first appearance.
I did find probable causes to count 1 for murder, count 2 aggravated child abuse, and count 3 is failure to report death of a person with intent to conceal the death or alter the evidence or circumstances surrounding such death. I did review the indictment yesterday. And bond on there is no bond on count 1. On count 2, it's $25,000. And on count 3, it was $5,000.
Demegillo will next be in court on April 21st. Her attorney said in court today that he's hoping that her bond could be set at what it was when she was just facing that manslaughter charge and she was able to get out of jail. Right now, she's being held on no bond. We should also note that law enforcement pointed out there are safe haven laws in Florida.
Under Florida's safe haven law, parents who cannot care for a newborn may safely surrender the child to any fire station, hospital, or police station, which obviously is something we encourage anyone to do. Palm Coast Safe Haven Baby Box allows for complete anonymity and is located at Fire Station 25, which was activated on September 30th, 2025. Parents can quietly and safely place their newborn inside the secure, climate-controlled box without having to interact with anyone face-to-face. As I stated, the investigation is still ongoing, trying to figure out every aspect of it. But if anyone has any information, they are encouraged to call the Sheriff's Office at 386-313-4911.
Join us now to talk more about this case is criminologist Dr. Debbie Goodman. Dr. Debbie, always good to have you on Law and Crime. Certainly a disturbing one that we're talking about here out of Florida. You know, you look at the charges initially and it was manslaughter. Now we're talking premeditated first-degree murder. That's a big jump. And she's really the only witness that was there. I know she made some statements to law enforcement, but what is the bar going to have to be to prove that not only is this murder, but it's something that she planned ahead of time?
Right, Chris. Well, always a pleasure to join you. And what a disturbing and just devastating case this is. You know, I was a little on the fence, actually, regarding manslaughter versus first-degree murder. But even in my head, Chris, as a criminologist, I do think this is first-degree murder, back to the elements, planning, premeditation, willful with malice. And why? Because she had searches about Casey and Kaylee Anthony and the pictures. Why in the world would she have those images and those searches? So that becomes very startling information that is not in her favor. And then also, Chris, just the fact pattern of what we know has taken place here, to include she allegedly gives birth to the 3-pound daughter in the bathroom, the toilet, lets the infant die, and then proceeds to also leave the home, to go to class, to go to a theater event, only to come home and bury the child. You see, there's so much time in between as well. If it really were manslaughter, Chris, then we would look more toward something along the lines of more of a negligent, reckless type of conduct, potentially even heat of passion, but I just do not see it this way at all, based upon now further revelation of the details.
Yeah, because I think about certainly it's a headline grabber when you see that she has a picture of Casey Anthony on her phone, and then also there are some searches, including for an OBGYN. There's a search for something related to trying to limit fertility. They weren't clear with, at this point, the timeline of when those searches were made, or maybe when the picture of Casey Anthony was allegedly put on her phone. But she did tell law enforcement initially she had no idea she was pregnant. And then you look at some of these, and if it's from ahead of time, that doesn't really help the argument that you had absolutely no idea that this is what was actually going on. But when it comes to premeditation, because the story in her own words that she gave law enforcement was something along the lines of like the baby was alive and crying. And then she kind of waited for the baby to pass away, allegedly, and then had said something along the lines that she was really waiting for that moment to happen. How much when it comes to premeditation, like the timeline, like how far out does that have to go to prove that? Because you certainly look at, you could have helped this child, an argument that a prosecutor could make, but she allegedly did it.
That's right, Chris. And in Florida, what we call the cooling period of time is very little time. It can be mere minutes of when an individual has recognition of a life of another. So remember, we call this type of crime infanticide. And yes, it is reminiscent of other cases that have been discussed on the platform and in national headlines, where we've had cheerleaders, right? Laken Snelling, you recall, who also participated in a very similar circumstance. And so then we start to piece together these elements about the why. We all want to know the why. We may or may not ever know the why. But for me as a criminologist, some of the prevailing thoughts, of course, and theories relating to when an individual would literally discard a child and end the death and participate in the death of the child, that is the infanticide issue. Now, sometimes it does deal with postpartum depression. I don't think that's the case here, because it was such an instantaneous type of action, and therefore I would classify this, Chris, as disposal theory, whereby individuals literally kill other individuals because they're in the way, or they're the interference, they're the impediment. And I think that's what's happened here with Ann Mae.
Well, and the other part too, because, she went through a pretty, giving birth is a traumatic experience. That's a physical, hard to find words to describe what you have to go through physically to give birth. Obviously I wouldn't know, but at the same time, like, she leaves, according to police. Like, the argument there of like, maybe mentally she was going through something. In the Laken Snelling case, I know that she said that she fainted after all of it and then woke up hours later. Like in this case, she goes about her day and not only goes to class, but then shockingly takes part in a musical production and then comes home and buries the child. How does that timeline of events, the after part of it, play into the charges that she's now facing?
In a very big way, Chris. Why? Because when investigators look at these timelines, it is, as you had suggested earlier, when it starts, in the middle, and toward the end. So how far back do we go with some of these searches? That's going to be very interesting. But this timeline, even if a jury were to consider potentially somebody in shock, but then we just go back to what we simply refer to in criminology as reasonableness. What is reasonable to do? If this young lady sees a child born, and if she's in shock, the reasonable person is still calling 911, getting medical attention, providing some type of aid and medical service to ensure the child's life and lifestyle. But we didn't have any indication of that whatsoever. In fact, what did we see, or what is proposed to have taken place? That Ann Mae literally watched the child die in the toilet, then to place her into the duffel bag, put that bag in the closet, and then proceed to leave for hours for school in this musical performance. Clearly, she knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing is wrong. Perhaps she didn't think she would get caught, and here we are.
And the part too, I mean, there's so many shocking, parts of it. I mean, obviously there are safe haven laws in Florida where if you give birth and no questions asked can go, to a place like a firehouse, and leave a child. And we've seen, those cases and those laws work, but that wasn't what police say was done here. The other part too is like she sent a message to a friend. That's how all of this came about, and you wonder, had she not sent that message, of course, all of this allegedly, do police ever find out about this? How does that even as well? Like when you think of her psyche, her mind, and someone who law enforcement has called oddly calm, which like we've seen body camera footage of her and we saw her in court. I mean, she's polite, she's calm, and it's chilling in some ways when you think of what the allegations are. But as a criminologist, and you kind of just try to make up who this person is, what stands out to you about, I don't know if compartmentalizing is the term, but the ability to go to the play, but then also remaining calm as you're facing, the reality of being convicted of first-degree murder.
Right, Chris, but also we would have to use the word remorse here. Did at any point in time did she display remorse? It certainly doesn't appear so, because we even saw information from the detective whereby she was asked, if you could go back 48 hours, would you do it again? And she said, I most likely would. So to me, that would suggest more psychopathy. Doesn't mean insanity, though. A person can still be with psychopathic tendencies. Really, at the heart and soul of that, as we know, is the lack of remorse. So I think that is absolutely in the spotlight. That was highly demonstrated, I believe, thus far in this case. And you're right also about the important detail of having notified the friend. And that friend certainly did the right thing, and she should be commended, because sometimes, in younger audiences, oh, well, you're sworn to secrecy, don't say anything, this is between us only. But thankfully, the friend knew enough to know this is absolutely wrong and illegal and notified authorities.
I have no idea if she's been diagnosed previously with any sort of personality disorder or mental illness. That will come out as this case goes forward. But, it's still like you sit there and you look at someone and it's like, how do you not show any remorse? How do you not even, maybe even for your own self, feel the shock of the moment of being in a courtroom talking to a judge as you've been charged with first-degree murder? I mean, when she's being cuffed, she kind of just like, puts her shoulders up like, okay, sounds good. And it's bizarre on the outside to look at it. How could, as this case goes forward, any sort of diagnosis factor into what her defense could be?
I think it's possible, Chris, but certainly not probable, because for even that to be suggested or even given any validity, we would have to see some type of earlier pattern of behavior, some diagnoses in earlier years, and thus far we haven't heard anything. Now, is it possible the defense will introduce something to that effect? It's possible, but again, I absolutely maintain this is not a temporary insanity defense, because I thought that might be something that will be introduced in court. But clearly she knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing is wrong. She proceeded as if you had suggested earlier, and I would agree, she was able to just compartmentalize this. Oh, this was maybe an hour in my 24-hour day, nothing unusual about this, and let me go on and go to class and go to my theater performance. So it's really highly irregular, but I do think it speaks to, at the heart and soul of this, is just the lack of remorse, no care whatsoever.
I know. And it's just, bizarre is kind of the word, but it doesn't, do the half of it when you think of the life that was lost here, in a child that was never given the chance to live. Big part of the evidence here too, that I think leads to the first degree murder charge is just her own words. and like what she told law enforcement. I mean, to say something like you were just kind of waiting for this baby to die, you know, admitting to what she allegedly admitted, like when it comes to putting a case together and what we could see, I mean, if this even gets to trial, how much do her own words, you know, really kind of hammer home the case for the prosecution?
Oh, it certainly does, Chris. Her own words, you know, the saying, I have met the enemy, it is I. So, in many instances of cases such as this or any category of murder that we would discuss, people all of a sudden want to now seemingly do the right thing, right? So, it's like this part A and part B to their own mindset. Part A, they participated in something so horrible, so heinous, so vile, and yet they're talking to law enforcement, and now all of a sudden they decide, well, let me tell the truth. You know, the truth is I really just waited for the child to perish. So it's unbelievable, but that's my interpretation at the moment of what's gone on here.
Right. And it's kind of just going back to the Casey Anthony part of this, because like even today after these, you know, we've covered this case and it was like the shock of just what police say happened at the home. And then you're like, wait a second, she went to a musical, she was in the musical. And then, you know, now after all of this, that it's been murder, you know, is what she's accused of. And then you have a picture of Casey Anthony on your phone. At the same time, I could see a defense attorney saying like, it's Florida. You know, she had a picture of someone who's very notable in Florida news still to this day. I guess how likely is it that that actually could be included in the prosecution's case? Or have you seen in cases that you've worked on where something on that, which could be argued to be circumstantial, but would be very damning if you just present that to the jury? I mean, I think a Florida jury would know exactly who Casey Anthony is, even though, of course, she was found not guilty. But just kind of what's insinuated by having that picture on the phone, like what more do you need to actually be able to get that in at a trial?
100%, Chris. I think that's it. You know, you hit the nail on the head. The prosecution will absolutely want this introduced because it's connecting the dots, you see. If some way, somehow, Miss Ann Mae were doing some type of study or project, or she had a class assignment, and this was the focal point, then potentially one might argue she was doing research. But I really think that's the far reach and a far stretch, and I don't think that's what's happened. I think Miss Ann Mae was literally doing this type of research, wanting to find another high-profile case, even though, as you stated, you know, Casey Anthony was not found guilty, and little Kaylee perished. So perhaps this was her attempt to see, well, if I could find a similar case, maybe that could be my favorable outcome as well. So I think it was intentional.
Yeah, and it's just a horrific story. Just incredibly sad. And we'll see what plays out. She'll be in court again April 21st. Her attorney trying to get her bond lowered. We'll see what the defense could be going forward. Dr. Debbie Goodman, criminologist. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Chris. My pleasure.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.